I'd like to introduce our panel. Dr. Gabrielson, you've met before, and I won't reintroduce him again. We have also Jim Henderson with us. Jim Henderson is the president of Counterespionage US and has over 15 years of experience in information technology departments, information system security programs, and the DoD Insider Threat Defense Program. He specializes in integration of counterespionage and insider threat concepts and provides the Counterespionage Insider Threat Defense Program training course to government and other personnel. Matt Sweeney works with SRC in Syracuse. He's a program manager and lead engineer in information analytics, and he recently completed an analysis report that he'll be talking about some of the content of that later on this afternoon in his presentation. And that will be on the whole person insider threat analysis paradigm. And then Randy Trezak, who you've also met earlier with Carnegie Mellon and the Software Engineering Institute and the CERT. And then lastly, Tom T.J. Vestal with the Air Force Research Lab here in Rome, focusing on cybersecurity and mission assurance. In addition to focusing on some of the policy-based frameworks and some of the other work that he's done, I need to point out he's also a very strong proponent of advanced cybersecurity education. He's involved in quite a few of those initiatives that get younger folks up to a working condition where they can help out in the cybersecurity community, which is a hard problem, and it's good to have folks focusing in on that. That's a very good thing. So what we've got is a set of questions, and the objective for this panel is to step through and have each one make some sort of a discussion comment on the flavor of the question, maybe not specifically the question, because I know that there are opinions, and those are great things in a forum like this, is to take the question and move a little bit beyond it. So what I'd like to do is to go through 6 or 8 questions, depending on how the time goes out, and we'll try to make our lunchtime, which is about 1 hour from now, but we can take whatever time makes sense and then have lunch and participate in some side discussions. We're going to delay some discussion of metrics until we have an opportunity towards the end of the day to talk in great detail about that, but it's certainly a fair topic. A lot of folks are using it. The general topic is to focus on good guys and bad guys in the insider threat, and what are trends, what direction are we headed, and what makes the most sense. So I've got a set of questions here. I'll go ahead and ask the questions, and we can step through and have Bruce and then Jim, Matt, Randy, and TJ just a quick summarized perspective on the question, take it a little bit different direction, and then please, if we have some discussion from the audience, that certainly is welcome. So here we go. In terms of the growth over the last 10 years in publicly available tools for assessing or prosecuting network-level vulnerabilities, that is network-based security, there's exemplars like tools such as Backtrack and things that are tool sets that are germane to the network security domain. Now, the insider threat doesn't appear to be quite so similar. There doesn't exist a particular bespoke toolkit. And what would you folks think as panelists about the likelihood of a toolkit being a valid thing for the insider threat? Is it a non-starter because you don't have those cross-cutting tools? Is the insider threat too varied? What do you think about the tool sets that might be used in insider threat?
Okay, the tool sets that might be used, there's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of tools out there, and it's interesting, at least in the academic environment, a lot of people say, oh, yeah, I've got an idea for some new way of hacking in, and it was already pointed out that it's not always somebody hacking in and impersonating, it's actually an insider. If you're going to look at tool sets, especially in a cloud environment or anything else, you're talking about being able to look at massive amounts of things in a very short amount of time. And I really think at the network level, we're going to start looking more towards not analyzing those massive amounts of data and look more towards what is an individual doing and focusing down more at a host level or a boundary of that host or that particular enclave rather than looking just at a network boundary and on large scale.
Thank you, Bruce. My belief on the tools are they're out there. There are different tools out there, Raytheon, Vertisys, but sometimes the tools that we discussed earlier won't catch the stuff because the activity, there is no profile. Just the person just decides that particular day they're going to go bad. So a lot of it to me just starts with basic principles of IA, and the people should know what they shouldn't do. Looking at existing tools in the network, what they have, content filters for email, WebSense, some of just the different tools out there, and using what you have. Organizations that I've worked with when I've gone around and I've asked to talk to them about insider threat, and I ask them what tools they have. Do you have a content filter? Do you have a SIM tool? Do you have this? Do you review your Windows event logs? I get those blank stares in the face. So to me, a lot of it starts with looking at the existing tools you have in the data feeds and then moving from there.
I think a lot of the, from a tool set standpoint, I would agree there's some commercial tools, but there's a lot of disparity because there are research tools that have certain capabilities that don't make their way. I like the comment about HPSS as a framework, and there's a need for that sort of thing, I think, to help researchers and other commercial entities plug in capabilities. But I think there's, I guess, a need for a basis of understanding and meaning as far as what is going on within an organization in order to build some of those tools and have them work across the organization as well. And I don't think that necessarily exists in a lot of organizations. So protecting data is a part of that policy, insider threat program. Being able to understand, I can combine information about my personnel security risks with, security information events, other kinds of activities. There's not a holistic treatment of that from a tool set standpoint yet.
Okay, my comment might be slightly different, certainly recognizing the number of tools that are out there that could prevent certain activity or detect certain activity. Traditionally, organizations have stood up the security controls that would protect the perimeter. It would certainly protect folks from the outside getting in or someone from the outside doing something to us inside the organization. But there seems to be a cultural reluctance to apply tools and technologies that's really protecting us from ourselves, in terms of I'm deploying a tool that's looking for suspicious activity on employees that are trusted within the organization. With recent events and the high-profile incidents that have come out, we've seen a number of organizations that are starting to look internally, applying the tools they traditionally have deployed at the perimeter to protect outside from coming in, to actually start looking for inside going out or inside going across different boundaries and enclaves within the organization. So in terms of at least the history of the 13-plus years of insider threat research we've done, there tends to be that cultural reluctance to really distrust employees. Where we vetted them coming in, we're trying to deploy ways to protect data, and at least historically it hasn't been protection from us in terms of that protection strategy. So, but going on to the comments that were made before, there are certainly tools and technologies. The goal of an organization should be identify what is different from what's normal activity. And certainly the core mantra of the security program should be the acceptable level of inconvenience, but not getting in the way of whatever your business objectives are. And that's really struggles most IT departments have just with the organization as a whole. How can we secure something but not necessarily get in the way?
Thank you. Any primary discussion points? Cool. Oh, yeah, Zbigniew, did you want a microphone or? Okay.
Just to comment on the other one, right? I would like it really that when we talked about the insiders, we shouldn't only think about when somebody wants to steal their confidential information. Frequently, it's exactly what you are talking, which is if you go for the critical infrastructure. This is what the insiders will try to do. They will not try to steal anything. They will try to damage. And this is very good example which you gave. And this is what I was describing in case of Power Grid. Could be very similar thing may happen as well. So I think we shouldn't lose this aspect of the insider threat, because many of the techniques, some of the techniques which we use to detect attacks coming from outside could apply in this context as well, because the insider has to do something in this system. And we can observe this. If we can monitor this, we can perhaps flag it before the damage happened to the system.
Thank you very kindly. Well, let me let me get to the next question, and then we'll need to go through the panel to get it there. Thank you. All right, the next question has to do with approaches to finding out what the bad guy's doing. There's a couple of standard approaches in the repertoire, and they're kind of two camps. You either have a signature-based, a very statistically oriented approach, and you have anomaly-based kinds of things. And in the typical network security community, there are exemplar statements such as a signature-based tool will find exactly what it's supposed to, high probability, really good tool. An anomaly or behavior, loosely termed, based tool will probably find things the signature-based tool won't, but the false alarm rate gets crazy after a while. So the question is, for the insider threat, which seems to be an interesting combination of trying to do technical things and behavioral things, is there something more natural about the insider threat analysis that would lead you to believe there's not quite this chasm between signature versus anomaly, or is it kind of the same thing over again and we still have to fight that battle with false alarms?
Okay. Remember, my background is more the IA side than the intelligence side, but a signature, let's talk about what a signature is. Are we talking about a profile that's been developed that will detect bad behavior, or are we talking about something like a virus that is a signature that you could look for real easily? You know, a profile is hard to develop, but once you get it, it is very useful, and you can analyze it, and you can compare it against somebody else's profile. So to me, I would call that a signature-based approach, but it's really looking for anomalies over and above what the normal activity is. So I don't know, do we call that a signature-based or anomaly-based? Okay, I would call that looking for anomalies that are different than what the signature should be.
Thank you, Bruce. I agree there are a lot of different tools out there, as I said a minute ago, but I agree with some of what Bruce said, that it's almost like a signature-based stuff will catch stuff that's been seen. But what do you do about the insider that's like a zero-day vulnerability? He comes up with a new concept, and he's not doing anything that's really way off the mark. It's just enough to exfiltrate the data, using a webcam or something. You know, people might say there's no webcam software. Well, you can go to anymeeting.com. I just sometimes look at it from a higher level. What's the base stuff they're doing? Is it outside the norm? That's the way I look at it.
I think from the combination of technical and non-technical approaches, that there's definitely aspects of personnel security, just knowledge in general about, you know, as been indicated before, behavior patterns, other aspects of risk that are definitely relevant that need to be brought into the context of how am I assessing the risk, how am I driving cyber insider threat forensic analysis, and that from an anomaly and signature perspective standpoint, I know that you know, we've been involved with research, you know, with DARPA and programs, you know, involving both anomaly detection, misuse detection, outlier detection, and being able to, you know, seeing ourselves and others combine those detection methods synergistically so that you're looking at misuse as your trigger, but you're able to combine that knowledge with other aspects of anomaly detection, so your false alarm rate, it goes away because you're really keying in on a combination of behaviors rather than looking at, okay, here's purely the signatures I'm looking for, and you're able to do some of that profiling as far as use of the information technology system itself. So not just user profiling, but looking at profiling, would we expect, as I'm deploying a system, what would I expect the usage to look like, and then being able to define anomalies based off that.
So in terms of the data that we've analyzed, certainly we say that we have a lot of data in terms of incidents, over 800 incidents. When we start looking across those, there are some patterns that could be identified, but that really gets to the organization, events, actions, conditions. It goes to possibly the motive of the individual. But when we start looking for the technical patterns that could be included in the signatures of these particular tools, we don't have a clear indication of that a consistent signature would apply across different organizations to identify something that's anomalous in one organization compared to a different organization. If we go back to the definition that was stated before about the malicious insider that Patrick Reedy uses, is the authorized individuals to authorized applications, but with malicious intent. That's where we start being able to see the challenges from an organization standpoint of deploying a tool that gets to the malicious intent. And then when we can try to find out within an organization, maybe we can start to develop what are anomalies in an organization. But when we try to apply that across organizations, that's where we're seeing some of the challenges that organizations where they buy a tool, they deploy a tool, and it's either identifying everything or nothing in terms of what's suspicious activity. And it really does take time for organizations to develop what are common patterns by the individuals, individuals within groups, groups within departments, and departments across the organizations. And again, you do want to be able to compare individuals to themselves, but also to peers or other groups across the organization. So it certainly is a challenge, and I think some of the delays in deploying some of these tools is that that the organizations are not able to take the time, at least initially, to develop these patterns and to identify anomalies based at the individual departments and organization-wise.
Oh, sure. Let Bruce one more comment.
Yeah, I just thought of something else. Don't get confused by a trigger or something that detects and what an insider is. Yeah, some things, if an insider does, are definitely detectable, but you know, you can get a threat indicator from just somebody all of a sudden took a trip someplace and happened to talk to a foreign individual. That is not saying that you don't need the other aspects, but like the other people mentioned, it's all you're looking for is something to kick off some other type of investigation or to watch somebody a little closer.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to have the MPG folks help us. If you've got a question, grab the mic. Any questions? Cool. All right. Pardon? We've got room for one, Charlie, if you want to give a question. Here, hang on a minute.
My name is Charlie Flynn. Some of you know me, most of you don't. A graduate of 42 years, working for the Air Force, 37 of it here in Rome, and I left AFRL in 2008. Amongst my many projects, one of them was the Client Server Environment System Services Program to get and clean up the 17 different flavors of Unix that DIA was using when I took over that program. And we worked very closely with all the manufacturers, all the people that wrote operating systems to homogenize system administration and security settings. Microsoft was one of those companies, Sun, the rest of them, I don't even know if they're still in business. They've all disappeared. Silicon Graphics and I guess Hewlett-Packard's still working. But one of the things you might want to think about is going to the vendors who build the operating systems to build in the controls, the application program interfaces, and the handshakes to do the auditing analysis, pattern analysis, and the rest of the things. That's where we had to go to get the audits. Then you've also got to find the bucks to analyze the audits.
Okay.
I can respond to that one easy. I happened to meet the chief engineer at Red Hat a couple years ago, and Red Hat has a very close relationship with certain organizations. When you find something that you think needs to be added, they do include it in the operating system. The Red Hat 7, I don't know if you're familiar with what they're working on, but it has a extensive auditing, profiling application built in now. So that's they work very close with organizations that do detect certain kinds of problems and say, you know, we would like to fix this a little better. Now, that's just one organization. When you get to very large commercial organizations where security might not be the main thing that they're looking at, they're a little more reluctant to add those kinds of things in. But certainly some operating systems are adding those kinds of things in now.
Cool. Okay, the next question touches on some of the things that have been discussed a little bit earlier this morning. Detecting triggers in near real-time audit data has received increased emphasis in the past few years. However, the storage and bandwidth impact has hindered the implementation of many potential tools. With new technologies being implemented to overcome this handicap, do you see increased applications for this particular solution set?
Boy, that sounds familiar to my
It should.
presentation. Well, we're getting increased bandwidth all the time, and as you know, we're getting massive repositories now, so we can look at stuff pretty quickly. You know, the internet gets better based on needs, okay? If somebody says we want more, faster, you know, whatever, then it seems like there are organizations out there that will build it better, faster, and so forth. So as we evolve, yes, a lot of those things start getting implemented. Now, I don't know if I'm in favor of a pie-in-the-sky repository that collects everything that goes on on networks, but I certainly can see if you take a look at some of the things even done right here at Rome, you start looking more at what is really needed for a detection. You don't need all that data. Just out of curiosity, how many people ever look at the logs as they're coming through? You know, I turned on HBSS the other day and I saw so many lines I couldn't even follow them, and that was nothing going on the operating system, with just lines of log data. You know, it's nice to say we want to collect everything and then go through and see what's there, and maybe you've heard some of my presentation before. It's also nice to say I don't want to collect everything in real time, just what's needed.
Thank you. Prior work that I've done for the government, what I've seen is a lot of organizations, and echo some of what Bruce said, is they don't necessarily understand what a trigger is. It's what of a minimum should we be looking at? Some people will point back to regs and say, oh, well, we collect that. But what are you collecting from an insider threat perspective? What at a minimum do we need to look at? We don't need to look at everything. For example, do we need to look at print jobs? Do we need to look at web surfing habits? What are the minimum things we need to look at, and then build from there? You know, coming up with a list of triggers, I found when I worked with some organizations, it just, you know, made it stand out. Are you collecting triggers on email, print jobs, as I said, and various other things, databases?
I definitely think that tools are available. You know, everyone throws around the term big data, but you know, I know that within our team we've been using real-time stream processing type analysis tools in combination with batch to process large amounts of data. And the key is, what's been indicated here is that you can't keep well, you can if you've got enough servers, but that the real challenge is reasoning about that information. So the consistency of common information models, each tool itself has its own common information model, and then you have to normalize those common information models, and then you have to reason about the data from there. And I think that's really the big challenge is even in, you know, cyber threat information sharing communities and things like that, there's a challenge in people agreeing on how to communicate this information. And so the problem isn't necessarily that the data's not there or the system isn't big enough or fast enough to analyze it. It's that I want to make sure I know that what this system is saying is the same as what that system's saying, and that the time frame in which it's being collected, I understand what's actually occurring in order. There's a lot of challenges there. So I think it's more about understanding how the data is being reasoned about.
Yeah, I would certainly like to echo the three comments that were made before in terms of the organizations. Certainly organizations that we've worked with are usually collect everything. Everything being just in case we ever need something, we'll have the data available. But to be able to actively mine that data for items of interest, which get into the triggers, is where organizations tend to struggle in terms of our opinion. Identifying what is something that should be triggered upon and something that acted upon is where organizations don't necessarily have insights in terms of what is considered an observable that should be plugged into and in combination with other observables to raise a level of something that should be investigated. So it's certainly something that organizations do, and we're also seeing that organizations, just due to, again, I mentioned in my presentation, limitations in time, resources, or money. Again, we have all the data collected, but we don't necessarily have the resources to write the triggers, deploy the triggers, and it's not necessarily a justification of why it's not being done, but honestly, the limitations of the people that are available and knowledge of is a limiting factor in terms of why the triggers aren't necessarily being deployed across a very large data set to a data set that is just everything and not necessarily the data that was said before that is of importance.
So I have perhaps a question. Randy, you said that the organizations or the people don't, there is a lot of data coming, but they don't really know what to monitor, right? This is pretty much what you stated. So my question is, how do we learn what to monitor? How do we make, step forward and say, yeah, perhaps we learn from the past, we know what bad thing happened, then from this we can maybe figure out what we should monitor for so this bad thing would not have happened, right? So is it the way to go, or there is some other way to figure out what should we monitor to get early detection of insider or any attacks in the system as well?
Yeah, I certainly think that's a great question. It may go back to the presentation I made this morning, and I know most of you are technologists at heart or have a degree of affection for technology, but it really goes back to the organization deciding what you're trying to protect. So if you're trying to protect your data from leaving your network, that's a particular strategy that you could use certain tools to detect information leaving, whether through email, through removable media, or other exfiltration paths. If that's the case, then we have that scenario of trying to protect data from leaving. There's certainly different types of data we can observe and look for, and different tools that could be deployed to try to prevent that particular activity from happening. So again, it goes back to the strategy of what you're trying to protect. Going back to the scenario that was presented before of the critical infrastructure sectors where a sabotage event by an insider would cause physical harm and harm to the IT systems, that's another protection strategy that would be ultimately different from the data exfiltration scenario. Certainly a number of tools could be deployed, general SIM type tools, changes in configuration files, changes in operating system files, deployment of certain code. That's a different strategy that would be for data exfiltration. And then from organizations that are in a financial type environment or protection of fraud, again, different tools would be implemented in a business process environment that would identify suspicious activity, suspicious transactions. So again, many organizations aren't necessarily able to identify what they're trying to protect or what the potential impacts are. And if you can do that, that might give you a head start on what you should look at and the types of data that would support your prevention or detection of that suspicious activity based upon that potential impact to the organization.
I think Trent had one. Oops, sorry. Trent, did you have one? Okay.
So I hear a lot of stories about what insider threats, the devastation that they've caused companies and organizations, but I'm more interested in all the experience that is on the panel. Are there any stories where the technologies and tools were deployed and you actually caught somebody? Like, we found this guy because we deployed this and we did our statistical analysis. He fessed up. He knew that, do you see what I'm getting at? It seems like we have a lot of stories about what's gone wrong, but I'd be more interested to hear of how things have gone right.
I think the answers would be interesting, clearly, and I don't think we can cover too much of that here unless there's anybody that wants to step up. Okay, we could discuss that in another venue. Cool. All right, so let me ask I think we're set. Let me ask the next question. And Randy, thanks for the lead-in. Great lead-in on your answer there. Talking about what you're attempting to do with the insider threat is an important aspect of how you attack the problem. So in some instances, your objective may be to prevent insider threat activities from happening. In other instances, your focus may in fact be on prosecution of an event because something bad happened. And in either of those situations, you may think a little bit differently and that's part of the poser for the panel. You may think a little bit differently about your approach to implementing tools, whether you attach the information to the data itself so you can see where it went, or you maintain the information about what is being done outside so you can, after the fact, come back and actually prosecute somebody. So the question is, would the differentiation between attempting to prevent or attempting to prosecute, which presumably could lead to prevention if enough people get their hands slapped, would that make you think differently about one approach versus another to mitigating insider threat?
I would say there are organizations that use both approaches, and a lot of it might be the sensitivity of the data. But certainly if you can tell the extent of a particular organization that's exfiltrating your data, that's very useful to certain groups that do the investigative work. So it's not always just because there's a trigger out there that you want to stop something. In fact, usually there's a trigger which basically initiates other actions. And those other actions would be looking for who the particular person is that the data is going to. Now, on the commercial side, that might be very useful as well. One of the things that was suggested a few years ago is phone home software added on to documents to see who ended up getting the documents. Commercial world, that works a little better than in the DoD world, but I think that was even developed here at Rome Labs. So the person who was working on it left already. He was sitting over there a while ago. But yes, it depends on the sensitivity of the data. Certainly you want to stop things real quick, but if you're in certain environments, you want to follow the trail to see where it goes.
Pretty much agree with Bruce. No other comment on that.
I might have a little bit different perspective, I guess, just from the analysis of how does the insider threat happen? Why does it happen? You know, in my mind, the insider threat problem is just as much about sort of workforce optimization, optimizing trust, optimizing understanding, helping people to know that they can reach out to a psychological professional when they need help, and not, you know, and do that in a confidential way and get help. And so there's, you know, prevention strategies from that end. On the detection side of things, I mean, there's trust that's established when people know that when I'm operating, I'm accountable for what I'm doing, and everyone else is too. And so there's a baseline level of trust there, and protecting the organization so that I know what I'm working on won't get lost. So I think they're definitely beneficial, as been indicated before. But I think that just that view of you know, if we establish you know, the whole, it's not necessarily a technological solution. Plays a lot into the back and forth there, because as litigious as our society is, you know, there's a case I might talk about a little bit later, you know, Citibank, where, you know, they had all the right controls in place, but nobody observed them, nobody paid attention, and so you get slapped with, you know, people breathing down your neck that way, and if you don't have those things in place, then everybody's upset at you. So it's you got to balance things there.
Just a quick comment on the prevention. It's certainly easy to prevent folks on the outside, or at least the goal to prevent someone on the outside from doing something. But when we move into the internals of an organization, prevent an insider from doing something, a lot of times that gets into the prevention of their day-to-day job activities. So when we move from the external to internal protection, a lot of times, unfortunately, it has to be from a detection standpoint, and that detection might be configured to alert on something that could be considered suspicious, not always malicious, but something that could be implemented to alert when something happens. Certainly the trust but verify model, as traditionally has been conveyed, should be certainly applied internally to individuals inside the organization with authorized access. But unfortunately, the prevention of insider activity may prevent some of the day-to-day activities that are needed to do their job. So certainly recognize that it's a challenge, so it needs to be a combination of both, as what was said before, prevention and detection or alerting when something's happened, and following up consistently with the investigations is certainly something that should be followed through as well.
Biometrics offers a means of direct identification of a user in a fairly short period of time and fairly accurately, even if the user is remote. So question would be, why would there be a reluctance to deploy these technologies further or to integrate them with other technologies? Or do you see a direction for that actually in place?
Well, I think maybe scalability might be a reluctance, or funding. I'm not really sure. There are biometric solutions out there that are deployed a lot of places. In the intelligence community, there's a lot of biometrics deployed. So to me, I would think it's very handy if you could identify an individual real quickly. You also get a pretty good indicator that it's maybe not that individual, and that allows you to take a look at all the actions going on. But again, that's just one piece of insider. That's a malicious insider, maybe a real trusted insider who wants to do some things and is going to impersonate somebody else that's already in the network rather than somebody outside hacking in. But other than that, I'm not sure the reluctance other than budgetary reasons or scalability.
Thank you. I think biometrics have a good use for insider threat. I still go back to starting with the basics of what tools you have in the organization before you go with too many tools, because it seems like what happens in a lot of organizations, people just run out and buy tools and tools, can't implement them, don't know how to use them, don't implement them properly. Before you know it, you have too much data. So I say you start with what you have in the organization, look at the data feeds, the data you need, and then move into some of the additional tools that can help, like biometrics and other types of software.
Yeah, this is more personal opinion, I guess, based on observation, but just that it seems like a monetary and time impediment to most organizations, that if you have to integrate two-factor authentication in everything, and people will lose, oh, he's gone, people will lose the devices and that sort of thing, then there's just too much of this initial push to make that happen, and with the cost, organizations just don't do it.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Not much to add. Obviously, the biometrics should be applied on the most critical assets, and it should be factored into your enterprise-wide risk assessment of what you're trying to protect. And certainly if that's an extra level of security that doesn't impede the business operations and protects the critical asset, certainly that should be applied. Where it's not broadly adopted, hopefully that's a cost benefit, or the risk associated with the asset you're trying to protect is not being deployed at the less critical assets that wouldn't cause a significant impact to the organization.
Cruise ahead. Next question. There's been a significant research investment in use case analysis as a means of identifying potential malicious insiders. However, the amount of personal data that would need to be collected on an individual might have serious privacy issues. There's also been significant progress in artificial intelligence during the past few years, and if there was a means to automate more of the background processing so that you don't actually have a human in the loop until the point that you need to actually make some decision point, the private information would be extremely limited. Do you think that that would have an impact on the public privacy concerns regarding that potential tool set?
I'd like that question answered. I'm not really sure. If you look at the privacy laws, you know, it's you need a court order really to go and investigate somebody, and you can't just look for data or look at data and then say, oh, I found a problem, now we're going to really look at that person. It'd be nice if we had a lot of background processing going on that just only showed us that threat indicator, and at that point, I think I mentioned in my presentation, you would now justify the use of going and looking at the real data. So I think there probably would be a way of staying within the legal framework of the Privacy Act and still be able to collect a lot of data and have some means of processing that data before you'd ever look at it, so that you could limit what you're really going to be exposed to or who's going to see it.
I echo that. I feel that there is a lot of data out there on individuals, especially that are working for the government, that could potentially be used as indicators. I mean, there have been numerous cases out there of individuals that have come to work for the government that have shown clear indicators beforehand of not behavior that would be, I guess, conducive to working in the government, but it was ignored, overlooked, or couldn't be used. So then again, these persons come to work for the organization, and then we realize later down the road there's problems. I mean, I think I even read an article last night, something came out of the Manning trial about stuff that was posted on Facebook that just kept getting ignored. I know that gets into a sensitive issue now. I know, I guess a lot of state laws have come out now that the government can't look at, you know, Facebook and other type of public information, but I think it would definitely be helpful in you know, possibly weeding out bad actors that would come into an organization.
Yeah, I would echo the, you know, public information that's out there. I know that some folks want to get into folks' private Facebook accounts and things like that, and that's overstepping definitely. But the concept of people trusting machines just look at information, everyone knows that there's still a human who can access the data on that machine. So I think there's just going to be an inherent lack of trust there if you're housing a lot of private and personal information. And as far as about using public information, you know, the government might not be able to access certain levels of information. Private corporations, on the other hand, have a little bit more leeway there. You know, HR recommendations saying, you know, it's prudent to look at what's publicly available so that you can understand what an employee or a potential employee might be doing. But a bigger issue might be a lot of this information becomes stale. You know, it's been talked about several times, you know, that once somebody is trusted, then they're forever trusted. In the case, you know, even Edward Snowden, there was a reinvestigation of his clearance, and I think there's a lot of issues around placing initial trust without understanding the evolution of life events, and a lot of that information can be collected. You know, if someone had DUI or other kinds of things that are public record, those are things that can be taken into account.
I certainly echo the challenge that organizations have with collecting potentially private data and using that for some analysis. I might want to take just a little bit different approach. On our team, we do have a lawyer who works for me, specializing particularly in monitoring and strategies from an organization standpoint. And one of the things that she challenges us with from an organization standpoint is to consider, certainly when employees log into a system, they're presented with a login banner. They accept that they're going to be monitored, and she's really challenged us to consider the expectation of privacy on the systems. Certainly, if you ask you as the operational folks, is there any expectation of privacy on the systems, most people by seeing that banner would say there's no expectation of privacy. But from an organization standpoint, that expectation of privacy should include the consistent monitoring of activity. And if individuals are allowed to do things on your network that might constitute that there is some expectation of privacy, to include using your networks and system to go to check their bank account or to send email, personal email on your accounts and systems. And that email may be going between them and their lawyer or their doctor or their union rep. That, in that cases, are information you're collecting as part of your logging strategy, but that might be protected communication that in some cases could not or should not be collected and used for any type of analysis or triggering a particular event. So when I thought about this question, I recognize it's a challenge, but I wanted to ask you as an organization that expectation of privacy and the employees able to use your systems and the data you're collecting might be violating some of those expectation of privacies on systems or conforming it or not. So I just wanted to raise that as just a discussion point just to consider, because we've been challenged with that, and we certainly are presenting that through legal counsel within our organizations and challenging organizations to consider that from a privacy and a protection of data standpoint.
The panel did a great job. You guys, thanks for discussing as well. This last one is a fairly easy question. I'd just like to get a comment on. If the good guys are the folks trying to prevent the insider threat, are the good guys on a winning trend, a losing trend, or is it kind of a draw at this point? Complete opinion.
And I'm the first one who has to answer that. Pretty much a draw. I think the good guys are making progress, and I think the bad guys are still able to do their thing until we've got complete control of the threat then and know what's going on. I think we'll continue to have the same kind of problems we've had.
I agree. I think we're starting to make progress with insider threat. I think there's still a lot of people out, not so much maybe government, but in industry don't understand it. It's this uncharted world. But I definitely think we're making progress, and it's just going to be education and time, and we'll get there.
I don't know if this will be popular or not, but I think the good guys are losing. And I think that because There's cultural shifts that indicate people want information to be free, and they're trained from an early age to think that it's okay to, whether it's downloading music, even if they're not trying to get profit from it, to just feeling like it's the immediacy of electronic communications makes my brain more lenient about what I'm willing to do morally. So that's a huge challenge. It's gonna, because that's really the basis for insider threat is, can I trust my employees? Can my employees trust me? And then as things move into more virtualized environments, as I can get access to my own virtual private network and send things, as you try and integrate more technologies and things continue to accelerate, it's going to be more of a challenge to keep up with that. So
Certainly from the reporting standpoint, we've noticed a lot more in terms of media reporting of people being caught or people being prosecuted. So obviously that's a good thing. We've been doing a survey since about 2004 to try to identify cybersecurity activity and how organizations handle that. Since about 2004, we've been consistently hearing from organizations that about 3/4 or about 75% of the insider incidents are handled internally and don't involve law enforcement. So from a standpoint of the reporting, we see it's getting better, but we still certainly believe that it's underreported. And if an individual goes from one organization to the next and they're not prosecuted for a previous incident, many times that's information that's not being able to be used as a screening deterrent from one organization to the next. Many organizations are only allowed to report they worked for an organization from a time period to a time period, and they can't really comment on the reason they left, et cetera. So to answer the question, we're not sure. Reporting is getting better, but we still seem to think that it's significantly underreported in terms of insider malicious activity.